Okay, great. It looks like you're ready to create your first program from scratch, or maybe you're just interested in how Visual Studio works. But either way, in this video, we will be creating your first program from scratch using Visual Studio. Now, there may be a couple of things there that that we type in that we'll get to later, but I'll point those out. But the most important thing here is for you to learn how to open up an empty project and the basic framework for how a program is structured, and then how to run it. So let's get started. Let's open Visual Studio. Now, if you're unfamiliar with some of this this stuff, there is a video back in the first topic all about installing Visual Studio. So you can go back to there if for some reason you skipped that. What we need to do first is to create our project. So you can go to File. There's more than one way to do this, but you can go to File and Project. Now, what you're going to want in this course, if for some reason you did a larger install, it may not be on Visual C++, so you'll need to make sure that that is selected. But if you did the install just like we did in the video, this should show up right away. This should also be highlighted. If not, you're going to want to do that. In this course, we use console applications. So once that's selected, you need to give your project a name. It can be descriptive. One thing you noticed before, hopefully before I deleted that, is that there were no spaces in the name, and that's a good convention to follow. So we're going to do that here and call this my first program. Now, another thing that you need to note that it automatically gave you the same name for the solution. You can change that if you like, but there's no real reason to. However, location, this is going to be where you want to keep this project. Now, your project will have its own folder and everything, but we're going to be creating a lot of these programs in this course, and so I want to change this to where it's all the programs from part 1 are separated out from all the ones in part 2 and things like that. Notice when I clicked there, everything's highlighted, so if I start typing, that whole path is going to go away. So you can make that unhighlight by hitting the right arrow key. There you go. And now we can, I want to get rid of test folder there. So under projects, I want to have part 1. Okay, so we click OK. Just to review before I do that, make sure Visual C++ Win32 console application, give it a name, make sure it's going into the right location. Okay, now let's go to OK. This is the wizard. You could click finish, but there's something we want to change. We want to go to the next screen. Okay, console application is selected here, which is good, but what you need to do on this screen in this window is select empty project. Now we can finish. Now it may take a second or two, but it's creating different folders and everything for us, and you can see over here. Now you need to create see, this is like a big empty thing. You need to have a place to start typing your source code, and so that's going to be in source files. So right click on source files and then add over here, new item. Okay, you're going to want source code files in C++ and in the extension CPP for C++. So that is what we want, and you're going to need to give it a name. Now you could name it the same as your project. You could leave it with the name source, however you want to do it, or you could also, you could name it whatever you want, but you need it to be useful. Source.cpp I guess could be okay. If you're taking, actually I'm just going to call this main. I would prefer to call it main. If you're taking this course somewhere else and you're using this as a tutorial, go with whatever convention your instructor gives you for that. They may have some naming convention for turning in programs or whatever. But anyway, so we've right-clicked here, we've selected this, and we've given our source code file a name. This is going to be a text file. And so we click on Add, and here you see it, main.cpp. Now you may wonder why I decided to call it main. Well, you'll see very shortly, because this is going to be the primary structure for all of your programs. So just follow me here for a second. We're going to type int or int, and then main, followed by a set of parentheses, and followed by these little things. Not sure what you call those. I tend to call them curly brackets. They're technically, I think, called braces, but there's an you need to open and close of those as well. So essentially what will end up happening is your entire program, not physically looking at it, but this is denoting your entire program. Now it will jump to other places and do different things as you progress through the course. You'll start to see, and all that will make more sense. But the point here is, this is your starting point. You need to call this main. You need to call this main because the compiler looks for that. It looks for main and says, this is where the program starts. So actually what I'm going to do is hold down Control and use my wheel to zoom in on that a little bit so that it's a little more clear. So you've got int main, open close parentheses, and then open and close the little curly brackets, the braces. Okay, one other thing, now you'll notice that it did indent when I hit return right there, is now programs may work without this, but you don't want to leave this out. Return, or some compilers may go ahead and stick it in there. You want to make sure that you have it there. Return 0. Now this is saying, and actually we don't even need that space, this is saying when you get to the end, go ahead and return the code 0, which means the program exited. This is basically saying we're exiting our program. We're exiting main. And that is where this int comes from. Int here stands for integer. We'll talk more about types and everything, but of course you know what integers are, and so we're returning an integer type. We'll get more into return types and everything in part 2, so that's a little ways off. But this is your main structure, no pun intended. This is your main structure for your program. Now we can try to compile and run that, and the way you can do it is in here. Okay, click that. Would you like to build it? Yes. Now before I click yes, depending on your antivirus, you'll see something kind of weird come up. And we'll talk about that in just a second. This one it's building down here. Here it is. So, all right, no problems found. Sometimes that will take longer. What will happen with some antivirus software is you need to, whenever you've got a new program that it doesn't recognize, it's going to try to scan it, because it's like, this could be, some type of virus or whatever. So depending on how tight that is on your antivirus, it could get very, very annoying. So you may want to disable that, and we're going to do that here. But of course, that's a personal choice, and you may be able to go into your antivirus and say, don't do that anymore. You can, figure out how to do that. But I'm going to turn it off here, but I'm not going to turn it off while I'm still connected to the internet. See, I'm connected to the internet right now. So actually, I'm going to do a little bit of quick magic and pause the recording real quick and disconnect from the internet. Okay, now I've disconnected. There were some things there that I didn't necessarily want you to see. Now my antivirus is actually hiding down here. Yours may be up here. And I'm going to right click on it and disable shields. I'm going to disable permanently. You can always turn them back on. I mean, it's just that I don't want it to, in 10 minutes, start giving problems, so I'm going to click on disable permanently. I don't think you can see what's coming up on this screen. Maybe you can, but it's just double checking. Say, hey, do you want to do that? Windows is fussing at me. I'm not worrying about it. Again, we're not connected to the internet any longer. Okay, so that takes care of that little problem. Now we can try running again. It popped up. Well, that's because it popped up and went away because our program doesn't actually do anything yet. This is just the structure for it. Okay, here comes a couple of things that we're going to add that you don't really need to know too much about yet. We'll get to them, but we need to add these so that our program actually does something. Okay, again, the focus here is on creating the project and getting it open, and the structure of the main structure of a program, and then also on running it. So what we need to add here is a #include, and we're going to, if you're curious, this is going to let us do input and output. Okay, another thing that you're going to want to add to almost all of your programs is this little line. Okay. Now, when I was thinking about this for explaining this whole statement could get really, really confusing to you at this point. But let me give you the short explanation. And that is this actually lets you use more or less a shorthand. If you don't include this space, it's not going to recognize anything that you use in the standard namespace unless you specifically tell it every time to look in the standard namespace, and you're going to be using the standard namespace a lot. So just go ahead and put this in for all of your programs. Okay. Now we're going to use some other stuff that you'll be learning about in part 1, but I think it's at least a couple of topics away. But again, we need to have it so that we have actual output and everything. So type cout and then 2 less than symbols, and then we'll type my first program works. Actually, let's put 2 exclamation points there. And then I'm going to type in something else here. This is a good point, though, here to note something. Here, this is called a pre-processing directive. That little hashtag there tells it tells the compiler to do something, so it's not actually a C++ statement. But this is a good point to, or a good place to point out that all C++ statements, you'll notice it's giving me a squiggly, it's upset, end in a semicolon. And also note that I put a semicolon here. So all C++ statements end in a semicolon. Alright, so we've got it doing something. This actually says output this and then drop down a line, which again, you'll learn more about that later, but we're going to try it. Okay, would you like to, we've changed it. And oh, by the way, every time you do this, it does automatically save this this file, so that's good. Oh, I don't know if you saw it. It popped up and went away. That's because our program ran, it finished, and it's done. If you look down here, it says has exited with code 0. So again, that comes from our return 0. That means it ran through the whole program. So you say, oh, well, this stinks. How can I tell, how it worked or not? Well, you've got a couple of options. The first one is not as good, but I'll show you that. And then I'll show you another one. And these are for Visual Studio. These are options in Visual Studio. So if you try them in other IDEs, you could run into some issues. So I think it's under debug. Here we go. So that button that we've been hitting is the equivalent of hitting F5. So in other words, this right here, clicking on this is the equivalent of hitting F5. So I'm going to hit F5 and see it did the same thing and exited with code 0. But if you look here, start without debugging, well, see, that might not be such a good option. But if you use that, we can hit Control F5. It will actually just run your program. Okay, so Control F5. Oop, here we go. Now I've already set this, but anyway, my first program works. Press any key to continue. Yours, I think this is where I was playing around with this before. Yeah, so it's already, the default I think is 16. So your screen will probably pop up like that. Okay, but either default, so if you click on this little thing in the window, depending on how big you want it. I wanted it bigger for the video so it would be easier for you to read. Defaults 28 I think was it, and that's just changing the default. It's not going to change that, but I'll also change it in properties to 28, and that'll make it nice, and now we know for sure. So this lets you see what we're doing in the videos a bit better with it being bigger like that. So our program, it's actually putting is kind of stopping it on its own because it's running without the debugger. It's not like anyway, like I said, that's not a good option. You can do that very quickly if you're just wanting to see something very quickly, I suppose, but there's a better option that works in Visual Studio, but not in some other IDEs. So this is something that you'll probably, especially in the beginning, before you get really where you're really good with your programs and learn enough to where you can say, okay, I want this to stop. And again, this is just for Visual Studio users, but you can type system, open parentheses, inside the quotes, pause. Now see, this works with the compiler, that the Visual Studio C++ compiler. So we can just hit F5 or hit this button. So that means that we're actually going to be starting debugging. It's going to look, we'll rebuild it. Okay, so it looks a lot like the last one before, but that system pause is actually sticking this in here. So we're actually still in the debugging. We ran it, we didn't have to run it without debugging in order for this to come up. So yeah, let's review that before we get to the end. So we can press any key to continue. Let's review very quickly. So we went to File, New, Project. We selected this. We gave it our name, made sure it was in the right direction or in the right location, and then we hit OK. It's not going to let us go. Uh-oh, it did. I didn't think it would. And then we went to, I'm going to cancel at the end. And then we went to Next, and then we made sure that Empty Project was selected, and then we finished. Of course, we're going to cancel here and cancel here. Oh, it automatically closed our project. That's okay. Here we go. Recent today, right here. This is where I did a little dry run, but you'll notice here you've got these. Also, when you first start your Visual Studio, if you're going to start a new project, so you can just start a blank one like this, and instead of having to go through File, New, Project. But this was here, so that's the one we were working on. So we can open it right back up. Then after we did that, we right clicked on source files, add new item, and again we'll cancel. We selected this, gave it a name, and then clicked add, and then it came up. After we did that, you might as well go ahead and put in some of these, especially using namespace standard, as that's the shortcut for you, save you a boatload of typing. And then we had int main, the parentheses, and then opened and closed our braces. I hit enter a few times to give us some space in here, and then we type in return 0, so that our console screen doesn't go away. You can type this in, and so that's what you're going to do. Basically, that's how you're going to start every one of your programs, going through that whole process. I do want to mention a small problem that you could have. Well, actually, you'll probably run into it at some point in time, and that's what if you create your program and you run it, it runs, but for whatever the reason, and we'll talk about different reasons that you could get into, this just it gets stuck and you can't get out of it. There's a lot of different reasons that could happen, and you're just like, oh, what do I do? You may be tempted to go back, especially if you're using the smaller console screen, and you come back here and you try to do, if you need to close your program, you've got a couple of options here. If you come back to this this screen, there's the little stop button. It's a red square. You can just hit that and you're good, and it will stop that, and you can come back and close your window. If or you can just do it the much easier way. Let's go ahead and run this real quick. Let's say that you've got this open and everything. If this works, just hit the red X on the console, and then see it automatically shuts down the debugger. That's the easiest way if you ever get stuck in your program. Okay, you've created your first program. It's a good idea just in case to save all, but like I said, every time you hit this, it automatically saves before it compiles everything. But you can hit a save all there unless there's some changes that you don't want to save. But you can hit that and close that out, and we're all good. This concludes another video for Introduction to Programming with C++, brought to you by LogiKomp. You can access the full course by going to the course homepage at logikomp.com/introcpp. While we are proud to offer this course free of cost to individuals, we do ask that if you continue to use the course, that you support its production and maintenance by making at least a small purchase from LogiKomp Domains and Hosting. You can pick up a custom domain, renewable annually, for around $10 at logikomp.com/hosting. Thank you.